Good morning. Who went to 845 church? Was that the best costume blessing ever? That was really fun. And we're going to get to kind of work on that theme of centering children and, in fact, talking about children and God, which is why we've invited an expert, Meredith Miller, to join us. Meredith is the author of this book, Woven. You know the next words out of my mouth. It's available in the Cathedral bookstore, and Meredith would be happy to sign it for you if you can catch her. I do want to say only a brief word about Meredith because I want to get started on this. We may have another visit at 10:50, a parade of costumed characters coming just to visit you. So a little bit about Meredith. So Meredith has written this book. I found out about this book one day when I opened my Amazon account, and my wife had ordered 25 copies of it. I'd never heard of the book, and I'd never heard of Meredith Miller, but I knew we were in at that point, so I should figure out who she is and what she had to say. I've read the book. I've taught the book. I think it's fantastic, and the reason we've invited her here is because the theology of the book is both accessible and sophisticated. It's sophisticated because Meredith is sophisticated. She's been educated at Fuller Theological Seminary, which, by the way, is where Thee Smith's dissertation advisor landed. Jim McClendon was there. And she also, while there, spent time doing research around youth groups. So there's some still science and experience behind that. But it's accessible because she's a pastor. She and her husband now pastor a church, but over the course of her lifetime as a pastor, she has pastored churches from 28,000 people to a church of 50 people. So that's quite an ability there to be flexible across those sizes, and of course those are very different systems. So that's the wisdom we're going to get to experience today is Meredith Ann Miller. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. All right. Well, I am so grateful, honored to be with you all. I'm so looking forward to this next hour or so that we have together. And I would love to start simply by naming a tension that I often experience in this work that I get to do now with families. Before I name the tension, I am curious, for those of you with kids in your life, whether you are parenting, grandparenting, auntie, family members, how many of you have kids you are often with who are under age 5? Would you throw a hand up? How many of you are representing an under 5 of some sort? They are so fun. How many of you have like the 6 to 8 range, that kind of early elementary somewhere close in your life? Nice, okay. 9 to 11. 12 to, we're gonna just do junior higher. How many of you have a middle schooler, junior higher in their space? How many of you have a high schooler? Okay, we're getting just a few of you in that. And then adult children? How many of you are like, I am an adult child? That is my main filter today. Wonderful, thank you. It's just really helpful to know. Okay, so here is the tension. Having kids in our life and being people of faith means we have these two big loves. You love God. Now, you may have days that you believe and don't believe, trust, and maybe not so much. But you love God. You've oriented your life towards living in this love, receiving it and extending it. And you love these kids. This is easy. Again, you may have days that bring up questions with no tidy answers. I feel like this is a shared reality, right? It comes to our faith and we go, hey, I have questions. They have no tidy answers. This is part of following God and learning to get to know God. Children are the same. Lots of questions, no tidy answers. One of my children's things, they are 9 and 11, Riley and Peyton, my sons. I would like to know how many more Pokemon facts I need to learn to be a good parent to them. There are these questions, mysteries of the universe with no tidy answers in both cases. And we have these two big loves, and yet sometimes it might feel like, if I love God and I love my kids, why does it sometimes seem tricky to introduce the kids that I love to the God that I love? And that might be That what you are doing now as you practice faith is very different than how you experienced it when you were their age. So even though you know what you're moving towards, you can't always think about how it feels and sounds in the world of a 6 or 7 or 12-year-old. It might be that the ways you were told a kid should do faith, you're now like, I don't know about that. For example, if you had to really sit still and be respectful, and now you watch the actual human children in your life and you're like, that feels like maybe an unreasonable request. How do we do faith now? It might simply be that you sometimes feel the tension because even if you feel really settled, you know, out in our wider world, there's a lot of bad religion. And it can be really painful if you get mucked up in it. And you just don't want that for these kids you love so much. And so you're thinking about how you can steer clear and avoid it. So the sources could be varied, but we still often feel these two big loves, and yet they don't always seem to be in harmony with each other unless we have the chance to explore more deeply what we want to do. What I got to do a lot, starting back in 2007 when I joined a research team and then continuing on, is look at the ways we can introduce these kids we love to the God we love and try to help navigate some of these potential pitfalls. But I would love then to name what 4 of these pitfalls might be. They might feel a little bit familiar to you, they might be new to you, but we're gonna walk through these 4 together. Each of them is a somewhat tempting, but ultimately unhelpful approach. Okay? So in order to guide these 4 pitfalls, here's our main question. What is Christian parenting? What is Christian parenting? Because a lot of the systems oriented around raising young people, they answer that question in different ways. These answers then, they correlate to these 4 unhelpful approaches, all right? So 4 tempting but ultimately unhelpful approaches, first of which is moralism. That the goal of Christian parenting is to raise good kids, moral kids, kids with great character, compassionate kids, patient kids, kind kids. And the temptation, of course, is I would love for my kids to be all of those things. Those are good things, undeniably. But moralism is a system that basically says being a good kid is the point, and God is sort of watching to see if you are successful in that. And undergirding and surrounding moralism is always threat of loss. If you are not a good kid in a moralistic system, then God, or probably more likely the grown-up that represents God to you, is disappointed. And so the way that somebody decides to become good is not motivated by a connection to God and God's love. It's often motivated by what happens if I fail. And that is what drives it. So moralism would say that the goal of Christian parenting is to raise good kids. And then it has like a cousin that we're going to call obedience training. Obedience training would say that the goal of Christian parenting is to raise obedient kids, because doesn't God want us to be obedient after all? And so they go together. Obedience training works delightfully for puppies. All puppies should use the bathroom outside. All puppies should not chew the remote control. But children are not puppies. We are not puppies. And life with God is so much more than obedient behavior. And the thing about obedience training paradigms in faith spaces for kids is that they assume that the grown-ups know exactly what God wants, what obedience looks like and sounds like and acts like. So grown-ups tell kids those things. And what that ends up meaning is that kids receive faith as 2 lists. One list is good Christians do these things. The other list is good Christians don't do these things. You may know these lists. Maybe you did not ever have to live these lists, but you might be familiar generally with what's on these lists, yes? In fact, I'm going to give you a few minutes. You are going to make a friend, introverts, it'll only be 3 minutes. You're going to make a few friends, groups of 4 or so, somebody who can open their notes app on their phone. You are going to make the lists together, okay? Or if you'd rather grab a scrap of paper, Either way, it's totally fine. But you need someone who will be a recorder for you for a moment as you make the lists, okay? So make a few friends. Again, the two lists are good Christians do these things and good Christians don't do these things. Try to make your list as long as you can. Don't worry about being right or wrong. Don't worry about whether it was true of your story or not, or whether you agree with it or not. Just name what you know. Go. You have 10 seconds to get your final answers out. 5. All right, that's it. Whatever guesses you have, they have been guessed. I am curious if a few of you would mind sharing some of what came up. Anyone? Good Christians do, yes. We're going to have actually a moving.
Share, though. We're going to try to capture this on a microphone so everybody can hear. So if you'll just raise your hand when you want to share, Sam and I will bring you the microphone.
Yes.
Just hold it there. You'll be right.
In our opinion, good Christians do one thing. They believe that Christ came, died for our sins, and ascended to heaven.
All right.
It has nothing to do with morality.
Mm-hmm.
It has to do with belief. And good people don't lie, cheat, or steal. So that's pretty simple.
There we go. There we go. Yep. So we got some doctrine we got to
You were
believe.
great.
And then we got some things there. All right. What else came up? We got a few this way.
Did you raise your hand?
Okay, we fell down the rabbit hole and did not get that lofty goal.
That's okay.
So, good Christians are kind. They go to church. They share. They listen to adults.
Yes.
They pray. They love God. They give money to church. Thank you, David Rocchio. Invite others to come to church. They know they're sinners, and they have compassion.
Yep. Those would be the kinds of things on the list. We'll go to the back of the room and then we'll come up to you and then we're going to go on from there. So we're just going to take you forward. Go
Okay.
ahead. We have one right here as well.
I think our main one was the golden rule and doing unto others as you would have done to you, seeing the good in others, empathetic, compassion, be kind, donate to church, serve others, go to church, have manners, and obey your parents.
Have manners. Are we in the South?
So our group had a list of things. However, one of the most important things is to have a relationship with God yourself and not relying on others to have that relationship for you. Because you can go to church. You can go to church for 40, 50 years, but if you never build a relationship with God, you have to know him for yourself.
You're jumping ahead of where we're going. Right now. Oh, you guys are very eager. I love this. No, I'm glad. Okay, we were going to stop, but these guys really want to say things, and I want to hear. So be our last ones over this way, and then we're going to see where we go from here.
Sam gave us the nice idea that good Christians eat their vegetables.
There they are. Okay, so I am curious, as your groups made these lists, who's got bingo? Feel free to get up if you can't see the writing. You can come around. Feel free to get up if you can't see. You don't have to stay in your seats. Do feel free to get up. Just come on over. Seriously. Anybody? 4 out of 5? Did your group, anybody get 4 of them? Even if you didn't get a full bingo? Close. So here's what happens. These lists, when the adult systems, whether that's the family system or a church faith culture, when adults tell young people that the point of their faith is to become a certain kind of person, to obey, and it gets prescribed to them. What happens is that young people come to believe that the whole point of faith is list management. That is what it is. That in order to become who God wants me to be, I am always working to get bingo. This is the biggest single research finding that has come out in the last couple of decades that the church in the biggest sense needs to be mindful of. That when young people are raised in systems that jump ahead of relationship and to application, when it jumps ahead of relationship and to response, but does not give young people the time and the space and the experiences to get to know God themselves, the effect of that is kids believing list management is the point of their faith. And in that system, their understanding of who God is that God is watching them, deciding if they're doing a good job or not. God isn't close by, involved, caring. God's observing and evaluating. There's a fancy term for this. It came from Christian Smith, the sociologist at Notre Dame, and his team in a landmark study back in the early 2010s. And what they found as teenagers talked about their faith, over 3,000 of them in the study, that list management faith meant they basically believed, this is going to be the test of whether you're caffeinated, moralistic therapeutic deism. Moralistic therapeutic deism. The point, moralism, is to be good. That's what religion's for. Therapeutic. I get to be happy because of it all the time. It is meant to make me feel good. Deism is an understanding of what God's like, that distant observing God. But a deistic God can pop in and should pop in, if I'm being good, to prevent crisis and keep me feeling good. Moralistic therapeutic deism, list management faith, give me my bingo faith, it works like a contract. If I'm good, God owes me. God owes me to prevent the crises. God owes me to keep me happy because I have my bingo card punched. And what you can probably imagine is how this plays out. One of two ways in particular. One of the options that comes from this is exhaustion, because it is so tiring to always be trying to be more good and less bad. The other is disillusionment, because pain comes for all of us along the way. And in the system where somebody believes this is really what God is like, that lowercase g God of list management does not show up to prevent the pain. And so a young person raised in this ends up feeling very alone when hardship comes their way. Exhaustion and disillusionment tend to be where this leads. So we have these tempting impulses on the front end. Good kid, character formation, manners, vegetables. Not bad things, but when they become connected to a faith system, as if God has opinions about your manners and your vegetables, we actually are sending ourselves on a path we probably don't want to be walking. All right, 2 more tempting but unhelpful approaches. Number 3, wait and see. The wait and see approach considers all we've just explored together and says, that feels really risky. I don't want that for my kid, so I will just push pause. I want to, on the good side, the good impulse, I want to respect that they are their own person. They're on their own journey. Maybe I'll just wait till they're bigger, better critical thinking, more nuance. Faith is complicated after all. We'll just wait. And that makes sense, but the flip side, the ultimately unhelpful side of wait and see is that doing nothing isn't neutral. Kids aren't just sitting around with no thoughts at all about how the world works and whether they're deeply loved and if all this God stuff is true. They're being formed all the time. And more than anything, we want to be in the conversation with the kids in our lives. And that is true whether you are their parent or their grandparent or their auntie or their family member. Every adult around a kid plays a really important role. In fact, more adults in a kid's life is a hugely helpful part of their faith journey. So that idea that we want to be in the conversation is what might motivate us to try things, even if they're not perfect, even if they feel clumsy, even before we might feel ready. It would be the same with any other important conversation with kids. When we know there's an important topic coming down the line, we often back that conversation up to the young years and figure out how to do it together. Conversations about sex are incredibly important for adolescents. In their early preschool years, we talk about bodies, caring for our body and how our bodies are good and how our bodies are growing. And those conversations keep us in a conversation that grows into what they need when they're older. Faith is the same. We don't want to just do nothing. We want to be in the conversation. And then our final tempting, but ultimately unhelpful approach that we often see is for families to either copy or go opposite of their family of origin. That either, I had a really good thing, so if I just do it like that, we should be okay. Or, as long as I just don't do what I had nothing at all, or maybe because it was really harmful. If I just stay away, we'll be fine. And our stories are important. Who you are and how God has been a part of your life is an important piece of what will come out when you relate to kids. But we wouldn't want to be reactionary when we have the chance to be intentional. And so if you have a co-parent that you're also needing to dialogue with, if you are at least also recognizing that if you had the good thing, that's great. The world that you grew up in is not the world your child will grow up in. Too much has changed. And so there's something about being intentional for who kids are now and the world they live in that we need to keep in mind. Okay? So before we move on, I would love for you to turn back to a group of folks and consider this. Of the four, which one pulls at you the most? Maybe you don't really do any of them, but one or of them probably is like this would be the one I have to be most mindful of, careful about to kind of work around. This is maybe the one that was part of your growing up experiences in faith and religion. So, of the four, moralism, obedience training, wait and see, or copy or go opposite of your family of origin, which one pulls at you the most and why? We'll come back in just a couple minutes. About 15 seconds. Whoever's speaking, take about 15 seconds to wrap up your thought, and then we're going to pause from there. All right. Terrific. Hey, anyone brave enough to share on this one? We'll take maybe 3 of y'all's thoughts as we continue on. Anyone brave enough to share on this one? Yeah? Thank you. They're going to bring you a mic. Sorry. Whether you like it or not, you got it.
Hold at the top. Oh, so your bingo thing was so many things on my list because I was raised very kind of fundamentalist church.
Okay. Yep.
So now I have done the opposite of my family of origin to come to this church, which I find much more freeing and welcoming and not so many rules.
Yeah.
So, and I've done that with my children as well.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want them to have to go through what I did.
And there's such an important distinction between we recognize that it's very different and we did it on purpose.
Yes.
Right? And so there's that pull of like, we're doing it on purpose, and then the caution of not always having it be that opposite is automatic. That I think, you're speaking to in a really important way. Like, hey, there's these things we knew we wanted. We wanted a certain kind of freedom. We wanted a certain kind of grace, which is really helpful.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I went the opposite. I grew up Episcopal, but then I went to Stetson, which was a Baptist school at the time, and so it kind of made me feel like I was missing something. So I went through, when I came to Atlanta, I grew up in Florida. When I came to Atlanta, I kind of went on the fundamentalist route for a while. And when I studied the Bible, though, I realized how brilliant the prayer book was and how it really reflected everything in the Bible. And it pointed out the most important things of the Bible. And so I came back.
Yeah. So what you're naming is such an important piece for so many of us, which is to have space for the whole journey, right? To have the chance to be in a process. And that is actually where I'm going to land us. What is the goal of Christian parenting? Moralism is going to say it's to raise a good kid, and obedience training is going to say it's going to be to raise an obedient kid so that God is happy with their obedience. Wait and see is going to say, I don't know what the goal is, I just don't want to harm them along the way. Our copy or go opposite would say, whatever the goal is, it's just to make sure I either do what my family did because it was great, or make sure that the thing I did not want does not happen to them. Or what if our goal is to be with our kids as they get to know God and discover God can be trusted? What if our aim for the kids in our life is to be with them as they get to know God and can discover God can be trusted? Put another way, what if we think about our role as adults who get to be with kids as presence and process? Not behaviors that we can watch and say they did or didn't do them. Not doctrines we can hear them say, and we're glad to know that they agree on those important beliefs, but that they would have the chance to get to know God, and that they would be given time and space to go through that process. Because even if you as an adult are so sure of God's trustworthiness, kids don't know that yet. They haven't had enough time. And so no matter how confident we are, that doesn't give us the right to jump over process for kids and just give them the prescriptions for what they do. Trust always goes first. And responding to that trust with our lives, with the ways we make choices and the things that we do, or even obedience, or whatever you might call it, always comes second. It is the biblical model, and it's also just how people do things. I would love for you to try to think of the last time you did something because someone told you to, and you did not trust them. Your mechanic? Your doctor? We don't do things because we're told to unless we trust the person, or fear, abuse of power, manipulation. So we would instead be inviting ourselves to say, okay, I'm going to be with this kid, offering them presence as they get to know God and what God's like and who God is and what God does. And then in that process, I believe they'll discover that our God is trustworthy. And if that's our goal, one way we could think about what we get to do with kids is to build a family faith culture, right? Because we actually cannot control this. A lot of the systems we explored at the beginning of our time, they kind of assume you can control a kid, but you can't. You cannot control what their faith journey will be like. You cannot do anything that will guarantee a certain outcome when it comes to their faith or spirituality. That was actually the original research question. What can we do to make sure that kids stay in the faith? And the answer, after millions of dollars and lots of years, is we don't know. There is no single thing that has emerged from the research as a magic bullet. There's nothing universal that every kid, if they have it, it just guarantees something. What we do have control over, though, is the culture that we shape, the culture we nurture for faith. So when I talk about your family faith culture, And when we explore in a minute this idea of a spider web, this is what I mean. It is the combination of unique habits and practices that help you live connected to God and to what God's doing, not only in your life, but also in the world. Your family faith culture, it's a way of living your ordinary life joyfully and sustainably and aligned with God's character, but also expressed in your own creative way. It doesn't necessarily look like everybody else's. Some things might be shared, like being part of this faith community and being here in a regular way, but some things might be totally unique, right? Part of our family's faith culture, and it might seem, well, no, because you all are Episcopal. It's not going to seem silly to you. This is so fun. We are compost people, right? Like the creation care, environmental stewardship part of faith means we have this compost pile in our backyard behind our shed. Our kids think it's very fun to sort their things. It's amazing that plants turn into dirt. It helps them think about God who cares for things over and over again. It's this tiny little habit in our everyday life that is aligned with God's character. And it's fun for us. It's just one of those pieces. Because faith works a lot like the way a spider weaves a web. Spiders have this process where they go to weave their web, they anchor their little thread up in a corner, probably the corner of my living room where I can't reach, or in the back of my fireplace where I don't want to reach. And then they swing across and they anchor again, and they swing across and they anchor again. They have a silk that is particularly strong. These anchor threads give their web strength. If we think about a web of faith, kids can anchor to who God is. The strength of their faith is not in their actions. It's not even particularly in their beliefs. It's anchored to the character of God. These 6 attributes of God's happen to be the 6 I chose to explore in my book as being 6 that I think can be really helpful to young people when they're getting started. But they're not the be-all, end-all. You might add others if it was you. Now, that spider has anchor threads, but they also have internal threads. So this is an orb web. These are the symmetrical kinds, where then these are these anchor threads. And all these little loopty-loopty guys, these are the internals. Internal threads are a different kind of silk. They give spider webs their unique texture, their specific way of being, their shape. And orb webs, like our example here, they actually make only 10% of all spider web shapes. There are also funnel webs, and there are tangle webs, and there are webs that actually have doors on them that open in the morning and close at night. These are from jumping spiders. I learned this week because somebody actually keeps them voluntarily in their home as pets. I was like, well, that's a choice. Spiders weave webs that are unique to their type, their environment. They all look different. In fact, even orb weaver spiders, every web, it's like snowflakes. At an individual level, no two are the same. There's something important about having a metaphor for faith that assumes that things will be unique to your family and your kid and your context and your culture, even while it's anchored to things that we might share in who God is, okay? So I would love to highlight for you, with our last few minutes, 4 things that did come out of the research since we didn't find that magic bullet, because it doesn't mean we didn't find anything. So here's the first thing when we talk about these internal threads that are unique. Young people need rituals and traditions. Y'all are already on the right track. Rituals and traditions, things that run on repeat. Some of these might be daily, like putting your kid to bed. None of us ever put our kid to bed without saying that we love them. But there's also an opportunity in the ritual of bedtime for how we bless a kid, right? How we call out their identity. The ritual and tradition of being able to participate in communion, the tradition of baptism. These are all things that go over and over and over again, and they become incredibly important for young people. They need some internal threads that are experiences. The difference between the two, rituals and traditions, and experiences has a lot to do with frequency. Experiences are not necessarily repeated over and over. Experiences are also a little squishier. Like, I might have the traditions that are part of my church That will translate into saying, I had the experience of being part of a vibrant faith community that was really engaged in our neighborhood. So that's the squishier part. This also might be the experience of being part of working for justice in some way as a young person, the experience of getting to go to camp or on retreat, the experience of having extended family members who talk to me about their story and their faith. So those are the squishy things, but they're intentional and they're important. A third theme that came up, young people need relationships. This is from especially Dr. Chap Clark and Kenda Creasy Dean, that started looking at the role that other adults outside the nuclear family play. Fundamentally, if you have a message that's important for a kid and you really want it to stick with them, like, you are loved no matter what. You are not valuable because of what you produce. God's grace is bigger than any mistake. God's love means that we don't have to live with shame. Whatever that core message is, you want that to stick with the kid, they need 5 adults in their life consistently who echo those messages to them over and over and over again. So if you are lucky enough to have a kid with 2 parents that are on the same page about that, you still need at least 3 friends or grandparents or coaches or teachers. They need to be consistent. Now, that does not mean you need to enlist a crew by the time your child is 2 years old who is signed on for the next 16 years. But it does mean you might need to think about who are some adults in the mix with these kids that you care so much about that would also echo the same kinds of things, that would also be a voice in that same way. They're almost here. Yes. Speaking of which, are they coming? Okay.
As an example of all of these rituals, traditions, experiences, and relationships, we offer you the children.
Good morning. It's good to see you.
You don't have to be quiet. There you go. Spider-Man. Good job.
I am Simon.
I know you're looking good. You're looking good.
Don't say anything, George. Don't.
Ghoulies and ghosties and long-legged beasties and things that go bump in the night.
Are you auditioning to be one of the adults? And don't miss that man in his Halloween costume either back there.
Oh, terrific. That was impressive.
I just want to say that's an old Scottish chant from ghoulies and ghosties and long-legged beasties and things that go bump in the night. And the kids respond, "Good Lord, deliver us," as they go to each of the different places. They've come from the Memorial Garden and now they're heading out to one of the chapels. Thank you for the introduction.
Yes. Oh my goodness. It's so wonderful. And so what you just saw was the fact that these are the kids who are going to grow up and say, I had the experience of a church that was like, Halloween's fun. We wore our costumes to church, man. Like, that says something about who God is. A God who invites us into joy, a God who brings a community where adults want to see what we're going to dress up as this week, a God who is playful and creative. It doesn't always seem like a one-to-one, but this is actually the kind of stuff that forms young people's sense of who God is. They aren't just wearing costumes to church. There is something in this weekend that helps them get to know who God is and why God can be trusted. God can be trusted because God does not get all uptight about costumes. Because I want a God who gets upset about important things. I don't want a petty God. What kind of wise God is petty about things like costumes? I want to know if God is mad, it's because something wrong is really happening. And there is a connect the dots between something like this weekend and the idea that God can be trusted because God is wise enough to know what's actually a big deal and what isn't. And isn't that an important piece? Okay, so the kids that we have, they need things that repeat at different frequencies, whether that is daily or weekly or just regularly, rituals and traditions. One of our family's rituals and traditions, we have Sunday dinner, which is a time that we grab takeout from a family-owned restaurant in our community. We order more food than usual and we tip really big because we want to support our community's businesses. And then we eat all kinds of good food. And over the times that that tradition repeats, we've talked about festivals in the Old Testament and celebration and memory. We've talked about God as abundant. We've talked about God taking care of us. We've talked about how we want to see our community have enough of what it needs. Not every time. This is not always deep and spiritual, but in the space of the tradition came the conversation. These kinds of experiences and then these kinds of relationships. Adults that surround kids, a collection of them. When it comes to adults surrounding kids, more is more. Always. Like you just can't have too many caring adults that are invested in a kid, that know their name, that know what they're into, that ask how their game was. And then our last major theme that came up is the chance to explore scripture. That kids need the chance to engage in Bible exploration. Because if we're saying God's trustworthy, this is the thing that tells the story of the trustworthiness of God. This is one of the main places we look to say, what is God like? And so to give kids the chance to enter into that and explore becomes incredibly important. And I use the word explore on purpose because in that beginning system, the whole point of the Bible is to just read the stories to learn if the person was good or bad, obedient or disobedient, and then the kid is just supposed to copy that lesson in their life. Be good like they were good or learn from them and don't do what they did. And it reduces all of Scripture to this morality-producing manual, which is not what our story is. But when we explore the Bible with kids, we're looking for, what'd you notice? That's weird. I wonder what that's like. If you were this person, what would you be feeling right now? Scared? Yeah, I'd be scared too. If you were in God's shoes, what would you decide to do right now? Let's see if that's what it's like or not. You explore together, looking most of all, not for how to behave, not even totally for what to believe, but for what do we notice in this story about who God is or what God's like. When you start from that question, then with kids at different ages, you can ask follow-up questions like, do you think God's always that way? Is it easy or hard for you to believe that God is that way? Tell me why, right? And so this would be the other one, to be able to explore Scripture together. I'm going to pause because I'm watching our clock. And I would love to be able to see if we have questions at this point that we could talk about together.
Given the time, we're going to abandon the microphone, so just
All right.
come in and project.
Be loud. We can do it. Yes.
At what stage do you expose children to wisdom?
What kind of wisdom?
All kinds of wisdom. Sooner or later, it's hopeful that we learn this.
Yes. I would say that a lot of kids right around 8 or 9 developmentally can start doing like compare and contrast thinking, which then becomes a good opportunity to present various ideas and say, what do you notice about what is similar between these or different? And what do we make of those? That would, I think, be one version of a beginning to conversations about wisdom that go on. Generally, I think that is one of the first brain skills you can start watching for to say we could go into these conversations and they could participate. Yeah.
If a person at high school, is it
It's never too late. Yeah, if you have high schoolers, no, never too late. Never too late. Now, if you have an older, like a high schooler, a college age person, and this wasn't maybe the way the culture felt, one of the neat things you get to do is you can actually talk about that. Like, hey, I've been thinking about these experiences we've had. And I'm kind of wondering if maybe that wouldn't have been how I'd approach it if I've been learning some new things. I'd actually really love to hear, kiddo, what has this been like for you? And so we actually get curious with them and just listen. Like, tell me more. And then I think also there's sometimes a place for apology. I didn't know what I didn't know. I'm sorry for the ways that maybe made you think God was a certain way that I don't think is true. Or I'm sorry if it made you think you had to be a certain way and it wasn't gracious. Like, I think that can be a piece of that. And this is like ongoing, but no, never too late. And then I think you figure out a next step, often based on the interest of your kid. Like, hey, I'd love to know if there is something about faith that you'd want to explore more, and like go with them in that. I will listen to that podcast and I'll take you to lunch on me and we'll talk about it. Or I'll read that piece or whatever the thing is. Like, follow their lead on what to do next. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go this way and then I'm gonna go that way. I'm gonna go that way because you're pointing that way. Hi.
So I had my 8-year-old granddaughter ask me, what is the meaning of life?
Yeah, it's great. Yes.
So how many adults ask me that?
Right. Totally.
So anyway, I had an answer, but I would love to hear what you would have to say about that, which I think goes back to your no tidy answer.
Yes, no tidy answers. Oh, if I was going to tell an 8-year-old the meaning of life, I would say it would be to get to know God and enjoy God's love, and to have the chance to help others know their love too. I think that would probably be where I'd start, to be people who live loved and help others know they're loved.
My answer was about that.
Yeah, I think that'd be where I'd go. Yeah, that's a great question. I love what they answered. Never too late. Yeah. Never too late. No, it really isn't. It really isn't. Yeah. Yes.
So I have a question that might be a little bit real. High school was in trouble. So I was a Holy Innocents Episcopal.
Okay.
And it was right when John Robbins is dead, Max Friend is dead, Al Stum is dead. How do you help high schoolers who are in trouble? 17 years old.
High schoolers who are in trouble. I don't mean this simplistically. I think it's still presence and process. But I think that means you really do presence. Like, really what's going on. And I'm not going to have any advice, direction. I'm not going to tell you nothing to do until I really understand what's going on with you. Not you personally, I mean the,
My parents are very Vietnam.
yeah,
Talk about Fort Ewing.
right.
Like there's a memorial to in Jackson Park for my dad's friends.
Do they know? Yeah. Yeah. So there's presence with an agenda, and then there's actual presence, right? And especially in the teenage years, whether it's like real, or whether it's just because they're teenagers, like their world is hard in all kinds of ways. And we need to be adults who are present without agenda and show that. And I think that's going to be like time. And then I think part of process is where are we talking about, like healing, right? Not behavior, not getting you on a straight path, but like something hurts, and what does healing maybe look like? And yeah, and I think that's going to be unique to each kid. I think the single biggest thing, if I was like a parent, would be to figure out how to have my house, my home, become a space that they could hang out in. So I had very good friends where the youngest brother, whose father died then when he was about 14, and he ends up in a substance use sort of place. And my best friend's mom is deciding what to do with that. And it's like, they all hang out at our house. Now, that is not always everyone's choice, but it's like, yeah, I know they're going to go in that shed, but I want them here. And they're now 15 years past, friends with all of them. One of them, the young man, has since passed away. They're at each other's funeral. Like, this is long haul. I'm in it with you. I will not break relationship. So if I was going to say a single action that I would say to the adults, it's get them in your home. Yeah. Anything else before we go? Yes, ma'am. Yes. 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 Right. Yeah. Yes. It is very forgiving. Yes. Right. Yes. 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 Within a range, this is absolutely true. A family faith culture that is supported by love and going in this direction and maybe kind of sometimes tiptoes into these other spaces or doesn't necessarily know better, like there is a lot of flexibility and a lot, I mean, one of the reasons we didn't explore as much today that I love this metaphor is that spider webs are strong because they flex under stress. I think faith systems that are healthy for kids, they do flex. They flex with changes in season of life. They flex with the things their parents come from and know. There is a lot of love and grace that goes through all of this, where it is, there are 100 beautiful ways to make this happen in a family, and so much flexibility for it not having to be perfect, to be healthy and helpful and supportive. Very much, yes. Yeah, I appreciate that very much. All right, we're gonna pause there. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I just want to say, and maybe you feel the same way, that Meredith has started a conversation that we will have an opportunity with each other to continue. It is helpful if you read her book, so a copy of that is in the bookstore. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. Good to meet you all. Thank you for having me so much.